You'd refer to this in technical terms as a sort of continuous Bayesian updating. So that is, what is the thing I can learn that would change my view, and how does my view change as a result of the thing that I've just learned? And if you do that ongoingly, it is possible to do what other people often look at and think, oh, you're kind of wavering around all over the place, but you get more and more accurate each time you learn something new, and for that reason, it's an absolute superpower. So yeah, I do always tell people to be very much fixed on the outcome, but also not fixed on the path.
So I wanted to do a show on sustainability and how technology is helping reduce carbon footprint. This show definitely ticks that box. This individual, Huw Thomas, is the co-founder of Counterfactual Ventures, who essentially help entrepreneurs come together and then launch businesses within a very exciting space, alternative protein. We talk about, lab-grown meat, alternative protein in general, entrepreneurialism, launching businesses. Huw is super, super knowledgeable in the space and in general. It was a pleasure to get him on. I think you'll love it. It's Huw Thomas. Right, so Huw, thank you so much for doing this at such short notice. I've spoken to you recently, obviously. We had a great chat. I was really keen to get you on the show. I obviously had you to come on at the last minute, so I really appreciate it. But thanks for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast.
Not a problem at all. Thank you so much for having me, Gareth. As a fellow, I suppose, half Welshman, born in Ireland with one side of the family being Welsh and the other side Scottish, very happy to contribute to a podcast being recorded from your studio there in Cardiff.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't actually know that. So you must have been torn in the rugby the other week then, because Ireland were over playing rugby in the Six Nations, obviously. I'm sure you probably wanted Ireland to win growing up in Ireland, possibly, but maybe your family was a bit split, though.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I actually, I used to wait tables in the restaurant as a teenager on half of the Irish team. Growing up in Limerick, the Munster team actually used to train just down the road from me. And of course, half the Munster team were half the Irish team. So my food journey, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, actually began with a combination of making pizzas at Domino's Pizza and serving and sort of plating and so forth, desserts, sides, etc., in a Thai and Indian restaurant that half the Munster team used to enjoy going to.
You've basically been through the full life cycle of food in general, and you've been obviously on the hospitality side right through to the really complex stuff you're working on now.
I have.
Yeah, so cool. So I'm really, really excited to unpack that. But of course, the listeners may not have come across you before and your organization. So if you could just give us a bit of an intro, then, Huw, in terms of yourself, what in terms of your background and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm from the west of Ireland. I grew up with a strong desire to want to find some way to use my career to make the world a better place. I really didn't know what that meant, though, so I sort of stumbled around various things, like spending a couple of weeks with a farm vet as a 14-year-old, which well and truly put me off farm veterinary practice, as it was very gruesome and grisly. Interviewed for the police service in Ireland. My uncle was in the Air Force, and really, I wasn't sure what doing good for the world meant, but I certainly, explored a lot of things. And ultimately, I'd spend most of my free time either playing on a computer that I'd had since I was sort of 4 years old, or taking things apart and putting them back together again. And my dad, being a mechanical engineer and a senior lecturer at local university, I suppose, imbued me with, quite good technical skills. I was always very fond of math and so forth. So I ended up, through this journey, deciding to study computer engineering as an undergraduate degree. As I said a while ago, I was always very interested in food and probably destined to work on food in some way. But my background was in computer engineering. I wanted to apply computer engineering not to a career focused on some particular language or subset, but rather a domain or industry, again, which would make the world a better place. So I did a master's shortly after the undergraduate in sustainable energy systems at the University of Edinburgh. Founded during that time a sustainable community energy consultancy, and then spent 8 years at a company called National Grid between the London headquarters and Warwick, living in Oxford, basically, working on innovation strategy, project management, and investment management during the day, and then trying to absorb as much sort of intellectual stimulation from the city of Oxford and its inhabitants as possible during the evening and weekend.
What were the most important milestones in the early part of your career?
One of the key milestones, I think, late in my tenure at National Grid was encountering an organization that gave me what I'd really been missing during my teenage years, where I was looking for that thing that I would spend my time on, my life on, in order to make the world a better place, which was an organization called, or community even, called Effective Altruism, which basically spun out of the pet project of the world's youngest philosopher or world's youngest professor in moral philosophy at the University of Oxford, somebody called William MacAskill, who wrote a book about a decade ago called Doing Good Better, which looks at basically the sort of foundational principles of moral philosophy, looks at what good looks like, and asks the question, okay, if, rather than donating your time to projects or your money to charities as a result of, those having the marketing budget to reach you and inspire you to do so, if instead you zoomed right out and did a full landscape review and sort of deeply questioned what good looks like, you had a full tool set to understand what the most important ways to leverage yourself to make the world a better place would be, what would you be doing instead of donating time or effort or money to these charities that have the marketing budget to reach you? And that led me to actually considering my sort of counterfactual impact. So I was working in the energy industry, focused specifically on the energy transition, so from oil, gas, and coal to renewable energy, in order to have an impact on climate change. But I was actually pretty confident on, reflecting upon what I'd learned in lots of conversations in this new community I'd joined, that if I was hit by a bus, somewhat grimly, the energy transition was pretty unlikely to be affected. So I've been a vegetarian and vegan on and off, and occasionally pivoted back to meat for about a decade. I've been very, very interested in and involved in local food projects. I've been running, actually, for a couple of years with a good friend of mine, an online sports nutrition website, helping people to find better, healthier, more environmentally friendly sports nutrition products, because I was a big cyclist with road and mountain bike, which we can dig into a later story. But this wasn't a core part of my focus. I was focused on the energy transition. I was confident that it was going to happen anyway. What I wasn't confident about was the whole world becoming vegan, especially given that I myself would very, very regularly rebound from this sort of really quite difficult lifestyle of not eating meat or, eggs or various other animal products when you really, really enjoy them. I absolutely loved animal products, and yet, did not feel that I was doing what I could for the environment and indeed for my own health in many cases. If you look at red meat being classified as a carcinogen by the World Health Organization, I didn't feel that I was doing what I could. So I actually encountered an article about Professor Mark Post at Wageningen University from a friend of mine in the effective altruism community, who he'd been basically involved in the very, very early stages of what's now referred to as the cultivated meat industry, growing animal meat from small tissue samples, so like a muscle biopsy, like you might do in sports science to test oxygenation of, say, your thigh muscle if you're a cyclist. And I thought, hey, okay, here, we've got this incredible opportunity to use different technology, as we do with renewables, to grow meat products and dairy and eggs and so forth. And exactly as with renewables, this will allow us to give humans and consumers exactly what they enjoy, right? In many cases, if you ask vegans whether they enjoy meat, they'll say absolutely, but I don't eat it. And at the same time, hugely reduce environmental, health, and importantly, animal welfare negative impacts of the existing industry.
Yeah.
So I basically, that is to say, I'd been working in the energy industry, really learning a lot, growing, getting involved with some fascinating things. But I discovered after this event of counterfactual considerations, I discovered that I wasn't actually very confident that I was really having much of an impact, given that renewables were well underway anyway. So decided around 2016, towards the end of the year, to try and transition into what I saw as this new protein transition, trying to transition from factory farming to alternative protein. At the time, it was considerably less certain than renewable energy. We were very much at that state of the incumbents, when presented with a new disruption, will initially sort of laugh at it. Everyone was laughing at it. Everyone was laughing at me. And I thought, hey, that's really promising. I love it that people are laughing at me for this because I can see that it's possible. My girlfriend at the time and now wife was doing a PhD in molecular biology and tissue engineering at the University of Oxford. And I figured, okay, you've got a scientist on one hand who says this is absolutely possible, and society on the other hand who say you're insane, let's laugh at you. And I figured that's a great recipe for success, where, as Peter Thiel would ask, there's a thing that you can see to be true, but everyone else thinks you're insane. That's kind of what you're looking for. So I think that was, one major event, basically discovering counterfactual consideration, discovering a new tool set of sort of moral, philosophical tools, thought tools, and discovering upon reflection that I didn't think I was doing as much in energy as I could be doing in food, which had always been my sort of side project since growing up as a 2-year-old with a garden full of vegetables in rural Ireland.
You've obviously grown up with this altruistic mentality. You've always wanted to do more, give something back. You obviously explained that. So I was just keen about this segue into food tech and alternative protein. So can you just explain, first of all, what the opportunity is here and how far we are down the line in terms of producing or mass producing alternative protein sources?
So what we're talking about is basically shifting the means of production of meat, dairy, eggs, various other animal products, including materials such as leather, from what is predominantly a factory farming or intensive animal agriculture based industry globally today, to the same products, often better quality, ultimately, according to the science, but produced using a completely different technological stack. So the area breaks down into sort of three main parts. One is plant-based, where we're not creating exactly the same thing, but we're creating something that certainly seems like it based on plant ingredients rather than animal ingredients.
Yeah.
The second, which is particularly exciting and where we're ultimately going in the very short term, sort of 5 to 10 years out, is cultivated, where we take a very, very small muscle sample, or for example, as a couple of companies in the space have done, a stem cell from a feather, and we use that as an animal would, as its own factory of protein and fat production, as of course we all are, to grow the same products, same materials, but in an environment that simulates the animal. So that is a tank effectively that is the same temperature, have the right nutrients, oxygen, etc. So that's a completely different tech stack, but leading to the same end product.
Right.
So for the consumer, it's basically the same, but with very little of the sort of moral downside, and a lot of the sort of quality upside, in that it's possible to actually tune that meat to have far less saturated fat, far better vitamin and nutrient content, and ultimately you can engineer it in a way that you can't with animals.
Yeah.
And the third area that we're looking at is fermentation, not quite in the way we mean when we talk about fermenting beer, but something quite similar. Effectively using engineered microorganisms such as yeast, as we do with cheese in the case of rennet, which is created actually through synthetic biology, to grow indirectly through the yeast rather than through the stem cells.
Yeah.
The same molecules effectively. So it's possible to put sugar in one end and have a type of custom yeast which will actually produce various things as per design on the output side. So ultimately, shifting from farming, as in fields and cows, to synthetic biology and plant science.
So I wanted to ask you, Huw, how far are we away from being able to produce meat in this way? In terms of delivering it on a global scale to what would be, make it a viable alternative to what we've got right now?
We need to look at this in sort of two separate, with two separate considerations. One is how far away are we from replacing meat with something that looks like meat but is made of plants? And then how far are we from replacing meat with meat, but made a different way, right? So at the moment, if you walk down pretty much any high street in Britain, you'll notice that just about every private equity-backed store, such as Costa or, brands that you might, cut that bit. Other brands do exist. So any major store at the moment, you'll notice, has very often in its window, for example, some of the sort of major fast food stores, big adverts about the vegan meat substitute products that they have available. So this is something that's absolutely booming. One of the 10 fastest growing and highest revenue for its size, if you will, brands of last year was in fact a plant-based meat brand based here in London. There's a great company here called This, and they're making, you'll have seen the packaging. It's basically like, this isn't bacon or this isn't chicken.
Oh, I know, yeah. I've seen it in Tesco, I think, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Tesco are selling it. So it sure does, come close in a way to basic meat products. We're not creating a T-bone steak, but it's basic. So incredibly good, though, if you absolutely don't eat meat, right? Really, really good. And the two founders are great guys. They're extremely driven. They're very rapidly growing. However, the global meat industry is like colossal. We've been trying to kind of cut into that with alternatives that don't come from animals for thousands of years in the tofu and tempeh and various other sort of old world products such as that have been around for a long time, are very popular, but still, comprise single-digit percentages of the volume of sort of meat sold in the world. This new wave of plant-based meat 2.0 is starting to grow very rapidly. The Good Food Institute in the US and New Harvest and Cellular Agriculture Society, and here in the UK, Cultivate, have been very, very instrumental in showing the world what can be done with these. But we're still quite a long way away, because ultimately, if you want to eat a meat product, plant-derived ingredients can really only go so far. They're very compelling for people who haven't eaten meat for a very long time, but in terms of those who do enjoy meat, it really is very, very difficult to actually stop eating meat and shift to an alternative. If you're a vegan, though, they're great because you kind of get to eat meat again. Looking at where we start to think about actually replacing meat en masse, we do need the cultivated meat industry to grow. And at the moment, certainly when I started working at New Age Meats as the COO back in 2018, just after my MBA at Oxford, I was one of three members of a company that was one of, I think, 5 companies certainly in the US who were making meat from stem cells at all. And it was tiny, We, 3 years later are at a point where this is slightly better established, but only in December has the world's first allowed regulated sale actually been made of this, category of product. So in Singapore back in December, a company called Eat Just, which was formerly called Hampton Creek, they managed to sell, and the Singapore government allowed the sale of their cultivated chicken product. So yeah, no other regulator in the world has allowed this yet, and we are at a point where the industry is starting to gain a lot more investment. It's starting to gain legitimacy, which is really important. We're sort of, I think we are now past that point where everyone sort of laughs at you and says, "Come on, you're insane." Although it's fair to say that the vast majority of people still really don't know of or know very, very little about this industry. And we're starting to enter a point now where scientists who have the relevant skills start to take serious interest, and entrepreneurs from other sectors think, "Oh, hang on, maybe this is renewable energy, and maybe it's the year 1998. Not as in 1998 pre-crash. Okay, maybe this is the year 2002, right? Maybe renewable energy going to boom, but instead of renewables, we're talking about alternative protein here, because there are very, very strong parallels."
Yeah, of course.
Tremendous amount in common between my background in the energy transition and what we're now seeing with this sort of nascent protein transition. But we're still a very long way away.
But this is exactly why I wanted to get you on, Huw. I think this is fascinating. I think this is the future. But I think there's going to be probably a lot of challenges in the immediate term in terms of adoption of this lab-grown meat space. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like the marketing challenge is as big as the product challenge, almost. You know what I mean? I think educating the public to do this is going to, lab-grown meat doesn't sound particularly appetizing, does it? How do you generally advise the companies you're involved with to go to market this stuff?
Yeah, it's really interesting. We do not put ethical considerations first and foremost, as ultimately in the sort of near to midterm, the products of this industry should actually be better quality and lower cost than those that we'll get from factory farms, right? So if you look at I don't need to harp on about the quality of chicken from the vast majority of sort of budget retail options, but the point is that current, global meat production is of a particularly poor quality for the environment, for our health, and for the animal welfare. But ultimately, it's also of pretty low quality. I can go up the road here in London to Borough Market, and you've got some very, very good quality, but expensive options. However, if you go to a major supermarket and buy something particularly cheap, then it's going to be absolutely terrible. And what it should ultimately be possible to do with cultivated meat production, because you do not need to have a whole animal that you don't use most of, because you don't need to have it wandering around burning off excess calories and turning a lot of its food into methane and polluting the environment. Effectively, you can massively improve the efficiency of an animal's production of meat by taking away all of the bits that it only needs for itself and growing only the bits that you need for the consumer. You can also basically shift production very rapidly in response to market demands. So if at a particular time of year we decide that we all want to eat some particular cut of a particular animal, often an animal which is not able to actually be farmed because it hasn't been domesticated. If you think about it, we only have like 5 species or 6 which we farm, and most of the time we only about 2 or 3 of those. It should be possible to considerably improve variety, quality, reduce price due to the improved efficiency, also through the tuning of the nutritional content, actually engineer out the majority or all of things like saturated fat, the carcinogens that we have in red meat and are warned by the WHO about. Basically, what we're talking about here is it is a massive whole-scale shift from where we got to by saying, okay, instead of going out and seeing what animals we can find and then just like hunting them and bringing the meat back, let's put them in a fenced area. We're shifting from 10,000 years of putting them in a fenced area and like slightly improving their productivity by selectively breeding them to, oh, okay, we don't need the animal anymore. Let's actually just grow the meat. We can do that in cities or in a variety of environments. We can do it on marginal land. Ultimately, we need a tank. We need the right warmth and heat source, and we need about a week because your volume of cells doubles every 24 hours, and you can grow meat incredibly quickly. The way to actually market this is not through ethical considerations first and foremost. It's through the improved taste, price, health benefits that will ultimately result from the growth of this industry.
Thank you for tuning in. I just want to take this opportunity to thank some of our friends. Firstly, all-round tech PR superstars Nelson Bostock. Whether you're an established technology brand or a fast-growing fintech, you need the right team behind you, a team that understands your brand, your purpose, your goals, and can really help you define your narrative and tell your story, the story that matters. These guys tick all of those boxes and more. You can find them at nelsonbostock.com. That's Nelson Bostock, the CK on the end, .com. Highly recommended. I also want to thank Tramshed Tech. We've come down here and they've kindly allowed us to use their world-class recording studio facility down here. But they do office space, they do events. I can't recommend them enough. That's Tramshed Tech. And also a big shout out to Be Digital, who make all this possible. Be Digital enable organizations to become lean, agile, and to attract the right talent. That's bedigitaluk.com. In my mind, and it probably infuriates someone like yourself talking to someone like me, because obviously you're from a STEM background, and obviously you obviously like to go into things in detail and stuff like that and be very accurate. And this is a really serious issue. And what I think there's two abhorrent things about the meat industry at the moment, which I think, are just not really acceptable given how much, how advanced we've become through technology over the last sort of 20 years. But the first one is obviously the wastage problem, which you've already touched upon. But the second one is just how bad factory farming is in most jurisdictions. I suppose the UK is probably better than most places, but the amount of suffering and needless suffering that animals go through and the conditions that we essentially breed them for and things like that is just awful, isn't it? But I don't know how much this has driven you on to get involved in this sector, but how bad is it right now? The global macro picture, how bad is it right now in terms of the current, factory farming situation?
Pretty tragic. It might very well be the greatest moral disaster of our present age. If you look at the global scale, more than 90% of the volume of meat produced annually is produced in very intensive animal agriculture. So in industrial animal agriculture, factory farming, if you will, certainly many tens of billions of animals grown in factory farms annually, which is one, terrible for our health and for the environment, and two, almost certainly completely terrible for the animals. Totally unnecessary as well. We're using outdated technology and we need to update it and bring it in line with what we're able to do now. We just landed yesterday a new rover on Mars, and we're still using 10,000-year-old technology to grow our meat.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. It's quite shocking, isn't it? Some of the things I've seen in terms of there used to be a website, Kentucky Fried Cruelty, and they used to just show how the chickens were treated for KFC, and it was just something that you never forget when you see something like that. And the fact that it still goes on is just unbelievable, really.
We're far, far more positive. We like to look at this in a better light. I mean, look, I spent all of my time in the energy industry saying, look, I'm incredibly grateful to oil and gas companies because without them, we would not have been able to create renewable energy. Okay, we have come a very, very long way with factory farming. We've been able to feed, low cost, questionable quality, but still sufficiently protein rich animal products to billions of people. We have this colossal global population now. And without factory farming, we absolutely would not have come this far. However, it is completely unnecessary given that we have new technologies. And it's completely unfortunate and sad that we haven't yet progressed to something that ultimately will provide us with even greater quality, more enjoyable products, right? So I like to look at this very positively and say, okay, thank you, Tyson, Cargill, Smithfield, etc., for bringing us incredible prices and volumes for so long. We'd welcome you to, come with us into the future and create something even better. We don't need to work with a sort of slight improvement on 10,000-year-old technology anymore. Let's do something much more exciting, and everyone will benefit as a result.
Absolutely. So you founded your current organization, Counterfactual Ventures, and was it towards the end of 2019, I believe, something like that?
2019, yeah. It was based on a really great catch-up phone call with an old friend who's now my co-founder on New Year's Eve, actually.
Right. So talk us through the purpose of the organization, what you guys do, and what problems you're trying to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, after my MBA, I spent just over a half a year as the chief operating officer of New Age Meats, where we made the world's first cultivated pork. We were focused on one product, one company. We fed that to 40 journalists, and none of them got food poisoning, so great success. But ultimately, I was very narrowly focused. I'd come from this background that was, I suppose, level 3 zoomed out, in that I was focused on innovation strategy, scenario development, forecasting, and sort of government policy and steering startups at a high level, to this kind of level 1 level of sort of zoomed out, where I was just building one thing. And really, I realized that where I would absolutely thrive was sitting between those two, being able to work very hands-on with startups, but with a number of them at the same time, from an ecosystem coordinator, if you will. I looked at the alternative protein industry, and as I said, it was very, very early when I started working in this space. I've been here since, I suppose, just after the beginning of the industry, and it was really poorly coordinated. On the nonprofit side, the organizations like the Good Food Institute were doing a great job, but in terms of the for-profit, we didn't have really clear signposts and roadmaps for entrepreneurs who wanted to get into this space and participate in this exciting future we're creating. So looking at the space with my co-founder, we decided, okay, our backgrounds are extremely complementary. We've got a massive network. We know just about everybody else in this space. We know that so many entrepreneurs and scientists are unable to find each other, and they're unable to find what to work on to most importantly and impactfully move the space forward. So Counterfactual basically exists as a kind of crossroads, if you will, that brings together incredible entrepreneurs from backgrounds often outside of this industry, which is quite common given that this industry is so new. Scientists who have all of the skills that need to be leveraged in order to create the products that will be the mainstay of the future of this industry. The scenario development, innovation strategy, and sort of landscape and gap analysis approach that I did in the energy industry. So very much taking the entrepreneurs, scientists, and the researchers who are fascinated by ecosystem evolution, systems change theory, and innovation strategy, but don't want to actually build companies, And we bring them all together and basically incubate new companies that fill spaces in the alternative protein industry, so as to accelerate it, so as to help the people who currently work in this industry and have problems that they can't tackle within their own companies. And so as to provide opportunities for investors to participate in the creation of the future of the industry.
It's kind of like Match.com for entrepreneurs in many respects, but it's centralized.
It is basically a centralized focus. What we're building is something called a venture studio. So if you want to take existing organizations and use those as a sort of reference point, we're building on one side Founders Factory, or BCG Digital Ventures, which I suppose might be lesser known, but does something quite similar. On the other side, we're taking Entrepreneur First, where I spent some time working myself as an entrepreneur in residence. And we're bringing those together with IndieBio, RebelBio, or other world-leading incubators, where, I, for example, myself spent some time at IndieBio, and we have either received investment from or are receiving a lot of support and advice from a wide variety of people within the existing incubator space, because this is, again, very complementary to the current landscape. There's really nobody else at all focused entirely on very early stage alternative protein companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm keen to break down what it is exactly that you guys, because I know you've got a very thorough vetting and screening process. What attributes do you look for in an entrepreneur?
We're actually looking for what we call outcome-driven entrepreneurs. So, when we present what we're working on to investors and other potential partners, one of the biggest concerns that often comes to mind, and I'm sure some listeners might have this in mind as well, is that if we're building teams from scratch, we're bringing them together with, as you said, effectively a sort of Match.com methodology, so a strengthened and very deep version of team building theory and Myers-Briggs type indicator compatibility and things like this. Sure, we're bringing these teams together, but don't great teams have a long history together? I thought just about everybody who's been successful has known their co-founder for a decade or maybe even childhood friends. And that's one of the sort of biggest concerns that pops up. How can you possibly put people together who don't know each other? Won't they just break out into all sorts of fights and arguments? What we're looking for in our entrepreneurs, to get back to your question, is an openness to understanding that though they are very, very good at business, though they are incredible scientists, though they have an incredible passion for achieving the outcome of accelerating the transition to alternative protein, they have the humility to understand that they're also possibly not the best people in the world to find the right co-founder for themselves. That is to say, if you look at human compatibility and the theory that underlies it, and executive coaching theory, team coaching theory, look at sports coaching, we wouldn't need any of these people. We wouldn't need coaches for top football teams if teams just gel well together, right? So we're looking for people who have the openness to the outcome of being brought together with somebody else who we understand to be extremely complementary to them, and coached for ongoing team thriving. We're also looking for an outcome focus in terms of, I don't have this great idea, but I certainly know what I want to achieve.
Of course.
Because the whole point of the sort of industry landscape review, gap analysis approach that we do on the other side of this business is to show you exactly how to accelerate the transition to alternative protein, to show you exactly what gaps there are between here and a future where factory farming is something that people vaguely remember. So, somebody who knows somebody else incredibly well and just desperately wants to work with them, very often they're going to fail, because the biggest cause of failure in startups, well known, is team failure. team failure can be avoided if we engineer specifically for that proactively.
So how do you pair and match them up then?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's basically a sort of two-phase approach in terms of matching. We are we've got two people at the moment comprising our team of sort of team theory and founder strength identification, personality matching, if you will. One has a background in modeling and intelligence at NASA, and more recently has built a very large, very rapidly growing team at an organization that I believe has recently been valued at $1 billion, and has a very, very high-performing culture. The other has a background in one-to-one coaching, therapy, and personality debugging, if you will, or engineering, helping others to sort of question themselves, understand themselves, reflect on themselves. And both have a very strong background in self-reflection, self-understanding, and are extremely well-read and well experienced in working with the sort of how of the human rather than the what of what you're doing. So often we're focused on the what, how is neglected, but that then, as I said, leads to 65% of problems being team related in broken companies. What we look for does vary, but the way that we look for that involves a strengthened version of Myers-Briggs type indicator profiling, or Ocean, which is a similar model. We've built on that with a number of proprietary approaches that we've developed over the last year. And once matched, the teams are basically coached ongoingly, very strongly supported, regularly practice sort of authenticity, transparency, open communication, reflection, and we develop into the culture of each company sort of safe space for team open communication, which is devoid of pressure of to-do lists and focused on team relationship, continuous improvement.
Of course, yeah. So how long do you retain involvement in the business then? Are they always associated with the company then, or do you support them and incubate them to a certain point and then you become more of a passive partner thereafter? How does that generally work?
We basically support from the point where people don't know each other and they don't know what to work on through to just beyond the seed round. So it's about a sort of 3-month process of matching, exploration, recruitment, etc. And then a 6-month incubator program that we're building. We, I should note, are approaching our first cohort at the moment. So we plan to launch 8 companies in June and then incubate those for 6 months. Mm-hmm. We will be involved after that 6-month period, but we are trying to be very focused on that early stage, helping you find each other, helping you figure out what to work on, indeed showing you the guiding light of what to work on, and then partnering with very, very strong partners who can help you much more effectively than we can from the seed stage onwards.
Right. Gotcha. Oh, okay. Great. So, well, I suppose we can come back to that just before we finish at the end. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on a couple of the sort of macro sort of things that are going on and trends and stuff like that. What are you most excited about in the world right now, technology and innovation-wise? What kind of... maybe, you know, I don't know if it's on the theme of sustainability or the environment or whatever, but what sort of technology innovations are you most excited about at the moment?
I'm sort of intuitively attracted to exciting, shiny, fast things, and for that reason, I absolutely love electric vehicles. You know, I've been a big fan of Tesla since 2009 when I first saw one of their sort of retrofitted Lotus Elise. I think it was,
of course, yeah.
You know, whip out the engine and put in a motor sort of jobs. But of course, you know, they're now very, very happy to see better in most ways than just about any other car, whether it be safety or top speed or things like this. What I'm really kind of focused on like learning more about though, and you know, trying to cultivate an interest ongoingly in is just about anything that is nascent, emerging, and can offset or mitigate sort of future major risks and issues. So just to sort of, as an aside, I'm sending a book I'm halfway through here at the moment called The Precipice by Toby Ord, who works at the Future of Humanity Institute at the University of Oxford. That looks at basically existential risk, the future of humanity. There's a lot of overlap with Max Tegmark's work and that of Yuval Noah Harari. And in terms of big sort of inspirations, actually the three of those authors are very much, who I look to for an understanding of sort of context and clarity on what the future looks like.
Fantastic. Well, I was listening to Elon Musk the other day on talking about Tesla on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, and it's incredible the amount of work that guy gets through. But I think the latest Tesla, I think, is going to break lots of records in terms of speed and efficiency. It's pretty incredible what they've achieved, isn't it?
I mean, it's crazy. Like the new Model S, which is an executive saloon, will go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in less than 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's the one he was talking about. Yeah.
You got Veyron, which of course cost £1 million. So it's really making I think this is a big win for technology.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Tesla absolutely could not do what they're doing with conventional petrol-driven engines, right? It's they've got a bit of a sort of foot up because they've completely changed the technological stack, and it's sort of very, very similar to what's going to happen with protein and meat, in that sure, you can breed Kobe beef, but bet you I can engineer something much better and it'll cost you less. Tech shifts are very exciting for me.
Fantastic. So what's the best piece of leadership wisdom or leadership advice that you've had that you sometimes may pass off to your because you obviously mentor entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs, not necessarily young?
In my journey over the last sort of 20 years, I've been two things. One is kind of intensely curious about, the other way around. One, very much focused on like how to make the world a better place, because I think if you try to, adopt the objective of making yourself as wealthy as possible, then life, and in particular, what's called the hedonic treadmill, the sort of continuous readjustment to new lifestyles, that's just going to kick you in the ass, because you can never actually have a bigger yacht than somebody else. And for that reason, you'll eternally be frustrated and sad because you aren't as wealthy as you thought you could be. But I've been intensely focused on the outcome of how do we make the world a better place? Two, really, really curious about what a better world looks like. And then given my most recent sort of up-to-date beliefs and views on what that better world looks like, how can I most effectively achieve that improvement, or how can I accelerate that pathway?
Yeah.
So I do not have a particular sort of thing I've been holding on to for 20 years. I've never said like, I must absolutely be a lawyer because that's the thing. I'm not focused on a thing, I'm focused on an outcome. And for that reason, if you combine it with curiosity, you can constantly update. I think
absolutely,
you'd refer to this in technical terms as a sort of continuous Bayesian updating. So that is, what is the thing I can learn that would change my view, and how does my view change as a result of the thing that I've just learned? And if you do that ongoingly, it is possible to do what other people often look at and think, oh, you're kind of wavering around all over the place, but you get more and more accurate each time you learn something new, and for that reason, it's an absolute superpower. So, I do always tell people to be very much fixed on the outcome, but also not fixed on the path.
Absolutely. Focus on the destination, not necessarily the journey. The journey will come, I suppose.
Kind of enjoy the journey as well, of course.
Oh, of course, yeah. But I mean, it's the Stephen Covey book, isn't it? I think Start with the End in Mind was one of the 7, habits of highly effective people, I think it was called. But yeah, I think that's really good advice. So you guys are currently looking for new entrepreneurs, I believe. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So one is, if any of what we've talked about is of interest, then you should definitely hop onto our website at counterfactual.ventures. That's COUNTERFACTUL, and Ventures, VENTURES. We are, as I said, going to be building 8 companies and therefore recruiting 16 founders, 8 scientists, or technical people of a sort of technical bent, so CSOs, CTOs, and 8 more commercially experienced founders from about the end of March, beginning of April onwards. We'll not close that for about a month at least, so we'll have a good window there, but we'll post details on our website, and it's possible to sign up to our mailing list there as well.
Huw, I will. I really look forward to seeing the products of your, alternative protein startups on the shelves of the mainstream supermarkets over the next couple of years. I think you're doing some great work. I think this is definitely going to be a space to keep an eye on. Where I think there's going to be a lot of innovation and a lot of disruption coming from you guys, and probably for the better as well. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. And it's been great talking to you. Thanks, Huw.
Of course, not a problem. Thank you so much indeed, Gareth. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Huw. Bye. If you enjoyed and took value from the show, then don't forget to subscribe, and also feel free to leave a review. We would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening.